Thank you for coming to our presentation this morning. My name is Brett Farbstein. I am the Commissioning Services Leader for Canon Design. My colleague, Noelle Thornton, is also with Canon Design and the Commissioning Engineer and Project Manager. We're going to talk about the essential role of commissioning in complex technology systems. Can I just get a show of hands of what my audience is made up of? So how many of you are commissioning providers? Most, all right. Owners, facility managers, engineers, designers? Great, all right, thank you. Don't forget, sign up, check in, get your education credits. So we're put together an abstract. When we submitted this proposal, we're looking at the specialty systems that come along often in our RFPs. So we're talking about basically divisions 27 and 28. Some of our learning objectives are hopefully you will walk away understanding how the value of commissioning technology systems, the various technology systems that would be considered specialty, and then some common problems that systems that are not commissioned pose to the owner. We're not going to talk about the systems that most of us are familiar with: HVAC, mechanical systems, electrical power, plumbing, fire alarm. Emergency response communications is a specialty system all to its own. We're not going to talk about that one either. So what are we going to talk about? As I mentioned, most of them are Division 27 and 28. They're considered the ICT, right? Information Communication Technology. And then we're going to briefly talk about how specialty systems come together for smart buildings. So why is it important to commission technology systems? I'm sure everyone is aware or have seen RFPs where owners have included everything, right? They just want to commission everything. So they throw fire alarms, security, AV into the RFP, and they really don't know what they want. And then they're at the other side where you have very sophisticated owners who know exactly what they want, and have put those systems in there on purpose. But ultimately, it's a system that most often than not is not commissioned, right? The vendor has the onus of delivering the system, and everyone just assumes it works, and the troubleshooting and the issues are worked through after it's live. So we of course recognize the importance of commissioning and having that system and the process completed so that we reduce those callbacks and issues later on. And because some of these systems are critical, they need to be working on day one. Everybody is familiar with the commissioning process, right? I'm not gonna bore you too much, but we're going to follow the same process: documenting the requirements of the owner early on, making sure those requirements are in the design documents and contracts, having pre-functional construction verification checklists, doing functional performance testing, and then making sure that there's training and documentation handed over to the owner for the operation and ongoing maintenance. I'm going to turn it over to Noelle to talk about the divisions.
Good morning. Thanks again for joining us. So I will start by talking about Division 27 a little bit. So this is a division that it's grown increasingly more complicated. It's gotten more and more sophisticated. Previously, as Brett said, typically the vendors are responsible for testing this, but as things have grown increasingly complicated, it just makes sense for the commissioning provider to get involved to assist in that process and to document some of the results from that. These will be 3 of the Division 27 items that we will talk about. I know there's a whole lot more, but a lot of them are very similar. You'll get kind of the idea for how to do that. But what we're going to do with each one of these systems is we're going to talk about what the owner requirements are. What are we expecting to see in the owner's project requirements? If they consult with us on the owner's project requirements, like the conversations that we might have. But if we're just reviewing it, the questions we might, ask of them to include in this document. Then we're going to go into the construction phase, the installation phase, and what are the contractors and the vendors' responsibilities, and how do we fit into that process. Okay, so for audiovisual systems, that'll be the first thing that we talk about. This, just to give you kind of an instance of what this is, I'm sure you all are familiar with AV systems, but this would be like in like what we're dealing with now, like the presentation equipment in here and the sound system. A classroom building where there is a projection system that's maybe on the ceiling and projecting something to a screen with a whiteboard possibly that the professor is using with, and he might have a microphone and there's speakers set up. So how do these things all work together? Other things, there's like a concert venue where you have like the sophisticated lighting and like the sound system in there as well. Let's see what, with the owner requirements, some of the things that we're going to expect in here. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. So first, now I'm backing up, sorry. I thought I had this. Some of the things that we're going to look for are what types of systems they want. We're going to need to know which rooms that these are, what areas of the buildings that we include. We'll also look into some of the systems that are integrated with this. These are the questions that we're going to want to know, and we'll want that also documented in the OPR as well. Some of the systems that commonly are integrated in here are, we've got, let's move on to the, sorry. Some of the systems that we would commonly expect to be integrated into like the audiovisual system is like the public address system. So we would have mass notification, possibly also like the fire alarm system. So if the fire alarm has an event, then the AV system will shut down and will continue. Then the fire alarm system will allow the people to actually hear what's going on and how to get out of the building. So some of the contractor requirements that what we're looking for is there's an organization called AVIXA. I think that of the Audiovisual Integration Experience Association. This is an organization that's dedicated to the AV industry. They have they provide a lot of guidelines. They provide training information, and they've got a lot of guidelines that we can look at for developing our checklists and our functional tests. Now, the vendors will have their series of tests, but we should look at like the owner's project requirements when it comes to this and make sure all of those things are incorporated in the tests as well. So we'll have a place in developing that. We just help with that. Some of the functional tests that we would expect to see with like an AV system is we want to make sure that like the audio, like the screen is clear and like the sound is good. We'll look at like we'll expect the contractor to perform tests that will do sound verification and to make sure that we have the right levels in here and the visual is good. And perhaps, if there's lighting controls involved in it, that the lighting dims as necessary. And then we'd also expect them to test any of the integrated systems. Next, we'll talk about like the public address systems. This is basically the any amplification of voice, or noise. So these type of systems would include like this microphone here, or if you've got a mass PA system throughout the entire building and you want to communicate messages to the entire building. And this can be like either recorded messages that are set up to deliver at specific times, or with somebody pushing a button, or it can also be like a live person actually talking into the PA system to give information. It can also be like a series of tones or noises, and sometimes those have codes. So somebody who's out there knows what these codes means, like 3 beeps means, I need to do such and such. And so that provides information to a select group of people in that case. And like even in like a hospital, some hospitals have where you'll hear a little bell and that signals that a baby has arrived. Some of the things that we would expect to see integrated into the PA system are things like the fire alarm system, so that they can do mass notifications of how to exit the building and where to go. And there's a number of different things that can be integrated, and Brett will talk more about our integration, but I'll give you just a few of those examples. So when the contractor gets on board, and we're starting to develop checklists and functional tests for them to complete, there's a number of different codes and such that we would look to for that. There's, I believe it's like NFPA 72, which provides the that's a code for like fire alarm and emergency notification systems. And that should be referenced. There's also an IEC standard that can be referenced as well, that helps us in developing checklists that match those codes. So we are making sure that we get those codes applied. With the functional testing, the type of things that we would expect the contractor to perform, and we'll assist in developing these tests as well, is making sure that like the sound works and where it's supposed to work, and is at the right levels. So we'll need sound meters. We'll have multimeters for like the voltages and such, and make sure all the connections are appropriate. We want to make sure that we have the right sound level and that the speech is actually intelligible, that you can actually hear what's going on. Some of the common, like, what was I? Oh, yeah. We'd also like look into like the training of the system to make sure that the people who are going to be using it know how to use it, and if there's any quirks with it, to make sure that, we have all of that under control so things don't come across too loud. If things need to be adjusted, that those can be done, and that the users know how to do that as well. So then we'll get into the nurse call systems. And the nurse call has some pretty strict requirements with healthcare organizations. NFPA 99 has some pretty stringent requirements for nurse call as the Joint Commission. So the healthcare organizations already have their standards that they're looking at, but they might have some additional things that they want to include in that as well to make it, a better user experience, for the patient. As one thing with healthcare organizations is they're all about their grades. They want to make sure that they're rated highly. So if the nurse call system is working and the patients are able to get the attention that they need and they're able to have some user friendliness with this, then that bodes well for the healthcare organization. Some of the things that are commonly integrated into a nurse call system might be for the nurse call system actually has two different components in the room. So you're going to have something that's at the patient bed. It's either installed on the bed or it's a little remote control or something. But there's also going to be pull cords like in the restroom and shower if a patient falls and or otherwise needs assistance and can't help themselves and needs help immediately. So some of the integration in the patient bed system would be maybe the entertainment system. They might be able to have turn on the radio or adjust their TV controls and volume. They might even be able to turn the lights off and on so they don't have to call a nurse to do that, or even adjust the temperature in the room. Alternatively, it might also be integrated with patient information system, so the nurses actually get the information on the patient as they're getting a call, so they know more information about the patient and what they might be able to provide to help them. And then when we get into the installation and the contractor requirements, the Joint Commission, again, and NFPA 99 would be guidelines that we would look at, as well as the specifications and any sort of vendor requirements or vendor documents. And we will assist in writing, we'll write the installation checklist, the construction checklists, and we'll assist in the writing of the functional tests. Then when it comes to time to functionally testing, we will observe as the contractor does their thing. Some of the things that we would expect to see is we would want to see the bed system operate with all of the functions, like when a patient pushes the button, that it goes to the proper nurse station, and that at the nurse station, they know what room to go to. And if maybe there's some lights outside the room that direct you to the room, that would be what we would be looking for acceptance. Also, the pull cords should have more of a priority when those are pulled. That should be a higher alert. That means, a patient usually needs help pretty immediately, so that should get the staff's attention quickly. So we want to make sure those priorities come through as well. Next, we'll talk about Division 28, and these are the security systems. So these are 4 of the systems that we will talk about. Now, there are most of the security systems are integrated within one another, and also I'll probably describe the integration once, just because they are very, very similar, and I don't want to keep repeating myself. And I know you don't want to hear me keep talking either. So we'll start with the access control. Now, the access control is basically the system that only allows access into a building if you belong in the building. Alternatively, it could keep people in the building, for instance, like in a prison or maybe in a mental health care facility where you only want patients in specific locations. So some of the ways of doing this could be, lock and key. Now that doesn't take a whole lot of commissioning other than, making sure that that is there, but that is one form of access control. There's also the card readers or the biometric scanners, which would, maybe do fingerprints or retina. And those are more expensive and a little more complicated. But depending on the level of security and how much you want to keep your building secure, that might be necessary. So some facilities would require that. What we would expect from the owner's project requirements with the integration, the access control we would expect that to be integrated with like the video surveillance and also with intrusion detection. And the way those might work together is if there is like motion detectors or videos outside the building that are scanning for unusual activity, and then the unusual activity would trigger the intrusion detection system, which would have its own series of events, which would then maybe go to the access control, which would lock down the building. It would prevent people from entering through normal avenues. So that's how those three would be potentially integrated together. To go into the functional testing, there is an NFPA. I had it on here. I've got a different presentation up here. That's why I'm fumbling. So it was NFPA 173, I believe, and that is for security guidelines. And all of these security systems would utilize this. We would look to that guideline for assistance in developing the construction checklists. The vendor will obviously have their own series of tests, but we will review that and contribute to the tests by, reviewing against the OPR. We want to make sure that all of the owner's project requirements are included in the functional test, as well as any integration that's in there as well. We want to make sure all of that is tested thoroughly because security systems are pretty important. Some of the tests we would expect with access control, we would look at the individual components. Like if we're doing a card reader, we would want to, you would have a programmer for the cards. So we want to make sure that the card programming is correct. And then we would also want to look at the actual reader to make sure that those work properly as well. The contractor would have a card potentially that works and one that doesn't work, and then one that works in some areas and not others. And that's how they would perform the test, is by checking the various cards to see where they can gain entry, and we can determine if the system is functional based on that. Some of the tools that they need, they will need basically like a multimeter for electrical systems, but then generally it's just the system itself and providing ways to simulate these, like the actual access control. Moving on to intrusion detection. This can be like done a number of ways. So intrusion detection, think like a motion detector outside of a building that would signal somebody is not supposed to be there. You would have the motion detectors to look for activity that's abnormal, which would start possibly a lockdown of the building. Or in a more fun example, with Mission Impossible or some of the spy movies where they've got laser beams all across the room. And if you break a laser beam, then you end up with an alarm system or maybe a booby trap. So depending on what your owner wants, whether they just want like the motion detectors or whether they want the lasers and the booby traps, we would make sure that those are all documented in the OPR, and that is what we're going to expect during the construction phase. So during the installation, we will again look at that NFPA, I believe it's 173, for guidance on developing checklists. We would coordinate with the vendor and on the testing that's done and compare that with the OPR to make sure that the owner's requirements are all met within the testing protocols, as well as any integration that needs to happen. Some of the intrusion detection tests we would expect the contractor to perform are simply just simulating an intrusion. So you've got your system set up and they would actually try to break into the building and set off these alarms to make sure that they go to the appropriate places and all of the integration happens. So that's what we, and that would be a fun one to observe. Next is the video surveillance. This can be done a number of ways. So first we've got like video cameras throughout the facility or on the exterior, and there might be some staff in a room with a bunch of screens, and they're just monitoring activity and watching people and watching things happen to look for anything abnormal. An example of that would be like a loss prevention department in a department store, where you've got several loss prevention officers that sit in a room and watch the cameras all day. And if they see something that looks suspicious, then they approach the suspected offender to see if everything's on the up and up, or if they need to remove the person. Another version of video surveillance, which requires fewer staff, is more of an AI version where you've got the same cameras and an AI is watching, looking for any kind of anomalies. And this is an example of AI taking over people's jobs. But, you know, it's not quite as accurate as a person sitting in a room, but that is what would happen is it would send a signal to the staff, and then somebody would come and try to address that the issue at hand. Other things where they may not want something watching all the time is they're just watching, they've got the video cameras set up and a recording is taken and it's sent to the cloud. Then if something is noticed wrong, like there's something missing or something's broken or something doesn't look right, then they can go to that recording and look for any kind of what may have caused that. Similarly would be like a CCTV, and it's exactly the same, except the video is more on a DVR and doesn't go to the cloud, and so it's right there and more accessible. Those are some of the things that the owner could select depending on what they're actually trying to do. One other thing I didn't mention before, one other thing that security is frequently integrated with, like the cyber security as well, because, you know, with like cybersecurity goes beyond just like computers. If somebody's trying to break into a building, they might hack the security system. So the cybersecurity system will help prevent that as well. Next, when we go into the installation phase, we've developed the checklist based on the NFPA guidelines that we mentioned previously. And then we'll assist in developing the functional tests with the vendor. And what we'll do is look at cameras. We want to make sure that the cameras are all covering things and there aren't any blind spots, and that you can actually visually, or you can do face recognition and tell a little bit more about the person that you're trying to record, because you've seen a lot of TV where they've got, something happened and they've got a video, but you can't make out who the person is because everything's grainy. So the commissioning process helps the vendor and us to screen through that and make sure that these things are intelligible. And if it wasn't something that was specified, it might be something that we bring up to the owner to see if they want something a little more sophisticated to get that level of detail. And then the last thing I'll talk about today is the panic dress systems. These are simply just a button that sends help. They can be complicated. It could just be like a simple button that is anywhere. For instance, like in a bank, you might find this, if there's a robbery or they need assistance, they would push that button and it would alert the police that they need to go to the bank immediately and there is probably a robbery underway. Or like on a college campus, they've got those blue lights for security that you can push. That's an example of a panic duress system. Sometimes you can get a little bit more complicated to prevent any false alarms. It could require 2 levels of action. You might have to move something or provide an identification before you push the button, and that helps prevent more false alarms. Moving on to the installation requirements, we would basically want to test. We would expect the contractor to test through the system where we're going to simulate an event. So the contractor will press the button and any of the integrations will happen. And if outside assistance is required, like the police station, that will happen also. So it's a little more complicated to run that test, but it takes a lot of coordination, but it is an important step to make sure that that system actually works correctly. Another thing that they can do is have basically drills, and it's the same test basically, but with the actual users who are in the place. So it's a level of training that's provided to them as well. So they'll go through that to make sure that it works correctly, and they know what to do and where it's located and who to expect to arrive. And a lot of places might run that drill on a regular basis so that it's a somewhat frequent test. Now we will move into the smart buildings, and Brett will take it from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Noel. So I didn't mention it before, but we embraced AI to create these images for our slides. So extra credit if you found the guy with the extra fingers or the spelling mistakes. So Noel mentioned roughly 9 or so different systems and subsystems that when you bring it together, both along with our mechanical and our lighting and our domestic heating and domestic water and the MBCX and the other systems, you start to get to what we're considering a smart building. The Internet of Things, right? There is data being collected on every system, and that's really where having these standalone security, standalone AV systems, when we start to collect that data and use it, it becomes a smart building as well. So I'm curious, what systems that we might not have talked about yet are you seeing being put into projects where you're collecting data? And what systems might we be seeing that we're not collecting yet, but will be? Are there anything from you guys? Yeah.
One is wireless access points, so like the routers that you see hanging down from the ceiling, we use them for occupancy data to find out how many people are using the space.
Absolutely.
Physical security information management, pulling in from BSS, ACS, physical security, perimeter security. I mean, any security system, we can go back
Yeah.
to the PSIM, and it's a lot of data, a lot of integration points.
Thousands of points. Yes.
Your presentations reference a Division 25 and 27.
Yep.
What is that referencing?
So the CSI that's the master numbering format for architectural art documents. So Division 27 and Division 28 are typically, as Noel mentioned, Division 27 is security, or
28 is security.
Division 28 security, 27 is
Low voltage systems.
low voltage systems. Great, thank you. Division 25, which I'm going to get into, is the integration of automated systems. Great. So some other systems that we've seen demonstrated in the large room next door. I saw asset tracking. I saw electrical lighting, right? So electric service provided through the lighting. But it's the future, right? Everything's going to have data collected, and how are we going to pull that all together and make it usable? These are typical Division 25 systems that you would see automated. Again, our Division 21, right, fire alarm, often connected to our Division 23 HVAC systems, lighting, Division 27, 28, as Noel mentioned, plus you could include elevators and other systems. Very often, what you would see in the Division 25 is a table showing the responsibilities of each of these other separate divisions and their responsibility of working together to make sure that these systems function as a whole. The Division 25 is typically managed by what we consider the master integrator. They are sometimes a separate contractor from the Division 23 controls contractor. Other times they're the same, but their focus as the Division 25 master integrator is to make sure that the other subcontractors are, again, pulling this all together. So there is some benefit of having a separate contractor being responsible for these integrated systems and testing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we did in our own Buffalo office. So I can spill a little tea because I heard it from the owner side, I saw it from the commissioning side, and I saw a lot of the discussions and the lessons learned there. Our main integration and bringing it together relied on the Division 23 controls vendor and the Division 23 mechanical contractor, the Division 26 lighting controls, and then we had it brought together under the Division 25 master integrator to connect those systems to Microsoft Azure and the Outlook planning. The idea was, and this was clearly laid out from the owner, was as the occupant entered the room, the lighting occupancy sensor would notify that the room is occupied, adjust the thermostat and controls for the HVAC, typical. But then the master integrator, with that lighting control and communication, needed to come back to Microsoft Office to show that the conference room was then occupied. And it basically blocked off the conference room for a set period of time. Likewise, you could go in through Microsoft, block the conference room, and before the time that the room was to be used, these temperature set points would be changed, and then the room would be prepared for that meeting. What lessons we've learned? Regardless of how detailed the spec is, when the general contractor bid it out to his subcontractors, they may not have gotten the full understanding of their responsibilities. In this case, the Division 23 controls vendor was also the Division 25 master integrator. They felt that they were completely capable, the contractor felt confident, and then when we started to get into it, the realization was they were not familiar how to integrate to Microsoft Azure. It was slightly painful, but we worked through it. And eventually we got the system to function. Another issue that came up was the haystack tagging and making sure that they were using the appropriate haystack tagging to name points so that it could communicate with Microsoft, as well as programming to the entire digital twin of the project. And if you're not familiar with the digital twin, basically it's a computer model of the building and all of the systems, so that as you changing one system or another from within the model, it's supposed to react the same way it does in real time. Not exactly how it functioned, but again, a lot of lessons learned. And it was one of the advantages of doing it on our own project, is that we could learn from this, not only from the commissioning side, but also from the design and the specification side. Some other general issues that not only may not have affected our project directly, but are general in these are, and I've heard them talked about when we in the presentations that dealt with monitoring-based commissioning and so on, is IT department protocols, security, and making sure that those communications and IP addresses and all of those protocols were approved and provided on times for the project to continue, as well as getting the information from the owner on the communications out. Because of all of these systems that Noel talked about, all have readings that go out to people, and you want to make sure that they're going out to the right people. Are they text notifications? Are they emails? Are they alarms on a screen? And when you're looking at a screen, typically we're all familiar with the BMS front end, and we're looking at HVAC equipment. But when you start to bring in multiple systems, they are all brought together on a single front end, and you may have to click through. But if there's an interaction, you want to make sure that interaction is clicking easily, and it makes sense for the user on how to go from one system to the other. And my last advice is we do not wait for the contractor to work through details that the owner needs during onboarding and training. I'm sure we've all heard that before, that the owner has some requirements, the controls vendor or the contractor says it's adjustable, I'll take care of it at training, and it's not helpful, because we're then checking something that may or may not get changed, and it's not useful for the owner on day one. So we've got to make sure that those requirements are clear, and we hold those contractors responsible to put those in prior to our functionally testing and accepting the systems and turning over to the owner. A couple of other items that on the smart building scene, both Spire from Smart Buildings from TIA and from WiredScore, the SmartScore system, are certifications on for smart buildings themselves. They look at a lot of these systems and integration and again the Division 25 requirements, and put together a certification package. I'm not sure who's gone after any of these yet, but this is the future. That's all I've got. So questions and answers. Yes.
At the end of the project,
Yes.
How many of those folks would want to do that large of an integration again? Was it a success story where they're like, yeah, I do it again, or is it something that they're like, man, I don't know if I would try that?
So I will say that we did a small integration, and we learned, right? But we certainly are going to do it again. There's just no way around it. As buildings become smarter, where this data is being collected, it's worthless if we're not using it. So I think the lesson learned is if you're going to hire a Division 25 master integrator that really knows what that means and can work with the other division contractors to not only bring their stuff together, but make sure they're working as a whole. I say, you know, all of the parties wanted to do it again. While it might have been painful at the time, I think everybody walked away understanding better and better prepared for the next project. Yes.
Oh, thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's very valuable and relevant to the new systems that we're seeing required to have commissioning. I wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit about estimating this kind of work. Like for HVAC systems, we can look at the mechanical schedule. Lighting is square footage or like occupancy sensors. I think just also maybe what questions you ask yourself when you're looking at a new project or an RFP and trying to think about how am I going to successfully and well do a good job on this project?
Sure. So I would say on a system level, we're always looking at number of meetings, right? Documents to review, how many tests that the contractor needs to do, their own QA, QC tests and validation, how many documents we have to review then, and then how much time is it going to spend for us to be on site doing the verification and then working with the owner for the training. So it's hard to say exactly. It really comes with experience and that particular system, and if you know that contractor. But I think the idea is when you bid it, you be very clear about what you're estimating to, and then if more time is needed because it's more complex than expected, or they're just not performing, the contractors aren't performing as well, then that's a conversation with the owner, and you go from there. As far as integrating those systems all together and looking at the Division 25, that is, again, you really need to see how complex it is, how many meetings do you have to have with the entire group of contractors that are working together, and I can't say it more. Define what you're estimating very clearly in your proposal, so that when it goes askew, you can go back and talk about it. Yes.
Are there any standards for how long you need to store the data that you capture through these security or video systems?
So that's good. That's a good question. I think a lot of that is dependent on the owner and the type of facility. But I think I heard in presentations, a lot of these data is getting pulled every 15 minutes, every minute. Every one of those points, it has to be stored for so long. And that is really a cost that we don't get into, right? That's someone else who's providing that server. So we certainly recommend it makes sense to store it for how long it's useful. HVAC, right? You may want a year so that you can go back and see how systems have been working more or longer. Security, they only might want it for 72 hours. It really varies by the owner requirement, which again needs to be spelled out so they can build a server that's large enough and bill them accordingly. But I think it really varies. Good. Yes.
Thinking about the process for technology commissioning, right? So MEP, there's a lot of places I can go. I can look at ASHRAE, I can look at the ACG, I can look at USGBC, and they can outline a process for me for commissioning MEP systems. When commissioning technology, is there anything in your opinion that is drastically different from the MEP commissioning process?
So I think the biggest thing is there's less moving parts, right? So when you're talking about an air handler or VAV system, you've got equipment, right? That functions, all has different moving parts, has multiple sensors that are feeding in, and there's an algorithm that's saying this damper does X based on the outdoor temperature that's, coming from C, right? There's lots of that. Where on a security system, you've got a video camera, you've got a door sensor, you've got a monitor, you have simpler components to the system, and a lot of it is electrical, right? You want to make sure the electrical communication is happening. So it's a different level of testing of reading the electrical currents and making sure there's not interference from other electrical and magnetic systems so that you're getting good feedback, as opposed to making sure different components within the machine are functioning based on sensors and algorithms. Do you have something?
No, I think that's pretty much it. But yeah, I mean, they do have their own standards, and we should definitely reference those as well. But it is a similar process.
Great. Thank you all for coming.